They huddled in the corner of the cave, 8 Japanese nurses who knew exactly what awaited them. The smell hit first, not the stench of gangrene and unwashed bodies they had grown numb to, but something foreign drifting from the cave entrance. American cigarettes, English voices, boot leather, and gun oil. The enemy was here. Emiko pressed her thumb against the small capsule sewn into her uniform collar. Cyanide. Swift death. Honorable death. Better than what the Americans would do to them. If you're interested in the untold stories of humanity in war's darkest moments, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. These are the stories that challenge everything we think we know about enemies and honor. 6 months earlier, Lieutenant Yamamoto had stood before them in the training room of Tokyo's military hospital. His voice was ice. His words were fire. Listen carefully. What I tell you may save your soul, if not your body. The 40 nurses sat rigid, hands folded in laps, eyes forward. Emiko was 24 then. She still believed the war made sense. If you are captured by the Americans, Yamamoto continued, pacing before them like a caged animal, death is preferable to what follows. They view Asian women as playthings. They will strip you, parade you before their men like livestock at market. They will sell you, use you, discard you. A girl in the front row, no more than 19, had begun to cry silently. Yamamoto's eyes found her like a hawk spotting a mouse. Tears are useless. Shame is eternal. If captured, you have one duty. He held up a small capsule between thumb and forefinger. This is your final service to the Emperor. Death before dishonor. Your family's honor depends on it. Emiko had taken her capsule with steady hands. She was a fisherman's daughter from Kyushu. She understood sacrifice. Her father had taught her that honor was everything, that a name could be destroyed by a single act of cowardice. She would not bring shame to her family. Now, 4 months later, that capsule was the only thing between her and a fate she could not speak aloud. The cave on Okinawa had been their world for 3 weeks. Dug into the limestone hillside, it twisted deep into darkness like the throat of some ancient beast. 200 wounded soldiers had filled it once. Now there were 40, then 20, then 5, then none but corpses. The 8 nurses had stayed because nurses stay. That's what they do. You don't abandon the dying, even when the dying are beyond help, even when the island above you is being torn apart by artillery that makes the earth itself scream. Emiko knew the other 7 like she knew her own heartbeat. They had worked together, starved together, watched men die together. Chio was the educated one, a doctor's daughter from Tokyo, who could read English and knew things about the world beyond Japan. 23 years old, with wire-rimmed glasses, she'd somehow kept unbroken through hell itself. She was analytical, always thinking, always questioning. Right now, she was calculating their odds of survival. Emiko could see it in her eyes. The answer was 0. Masako was the oldest at 29, a widow. Her husband had died at Guadalcanal 2 years ago. She had the maternal instinct that made wounded soldiers call her older sister, even as they died in her arms. Her hair was shot through with premature gray. Her hands never stopped shaking anymore. Hana was the youngest at 19. She'd been a schoolteacher before the war, gentle and soft-spoken, utterly unprepared for the things she'd seen. She still flinched at loud noises. She still cried every night when she thought the others were asleep. She wasn't built for war. No one really was, but especially not her. Akane was the hard one, 27. She'd been in China. She'd seen Nanking. Something in her eyes had died there, and what remained was cold as winter steel. She spoke rarely. When she did, her voice could cut glass. She would take the capsule without hesitation. Emiko knew this. Kiyomi was 24, same as Emiko. She was a Christian, though she hid it carefully. Christianity was suspect in wartime Japan, but Emiko had seen her pray once, hands clasped, lips moving in silent words to a foreign god. Kiyomi believed in mercy. She was about to learn there was none. Tomoe was a farmer's daughter from the mountains, 26, with hands strong enough to hold down a struggling soldier during amputation without anesthesia. She was the physical strength of their group, the one who could lift supplies, move equipment, work for hours without stopping. But even her strength had limits. Ayaka was the privileged one, 22, from a wealthy merchant family in Osaka. The war had been an abstraction to her until she volunteered as a nurse, thinking it would be noble and heroic. She'd discovered it was neither. She vomited after every surgery. She looked 10 years older than when she'd arrived. Privilege had not prepared her for reality, and Emiko. She was the practical one, the steady one. Her father had taught her to gut fish at age 6, to read the ocean, to understand that death was natural and fear was useless. She had thought war would be like fishing. Sometimes you catch nothing. Sometimes you catch too much. Sometimes the sea takes you. She had been wrong. War was nothing like fishing. War was drowning in blood while someone held your head under. The American voices grew louder. They were speaking English, words that meant nothing to ears trained in Japanese. But the tone meant everything. Commands, coordination. They were searching the cave systematically. Now, Masako whispered. Her voice was steady, final. Before they reach us, 8 hands moved to 8 collars. 8 fingers found 8 capsules. Emiko's heart hammered against her ribs. Her mouth was dry as sand. Her father's face appeared in her mind. I'm sorry, father. I'm sorry I won't come home. But I will die with honor. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness like a sword. The light found them. 8 women pressed against the cave wall. 8 nurses in tattered gray uniforms stained with blood that wasn't their own. 8 pairs of eyes wide with terror. The American soldier who held the flashlight was young. 20 at most. Red hair, freckles, a face that would have been at home on a farm, not in a cave hunting enemies. He froze when he saw them. For 3 seconds, nothing moved. The soldier stared. The nurses stared back. Time crystallized into something sharp enough to cut. Then the soldier's face changed, not into the lust they'd been taught to expect, into shock, maybe horror, maybe pity. He didn't raise his rifle. He didn't smile that cruel smile they'd been warned about. He just backed away slowly, hands up, palms out, and shouted over his shoulder in English. Captain Mercer, we got civilians, women, nurses. Chio understood some English. She translated in a whisper that shook. He's calling for someone. A captain. It's a trap, Akane hissed. They want us compliant before what? Hana's voice was a child's voice, small and terrified. Before they... Don't say it. Masako cut her off. Don't speak it into existence. But it was already spoken. It lived in their minds like a parasite. They knew what awaited them. Lieutenant Yamamoto had made certain they knew. More Americans appeared at the cave entrance. 5, 10, 20. They filled the narrow space with their bulk, their weapons, their foreignness. They were so tall. Emiko had never seen men so tall. They wore clean uniforms. Clean. After months of fighting, they wore clean uniforms. How was that possible? One of them stepped forward. He was older than the others, maybe 35, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of exhaustion rather than cruelty. He removed his helmet, tucked it under his arm, and stopped 10 feet from them. The captain. It had to be the captain. He studied them for a long moment. 8 terrified women. 8 hands hidden against their bodies, fingers on death. He seemed to understand something. His jaw tightened. Behind him, another soldier appeared. Asian face, Japanese features. He wore an American uniform. Traitor, Akane breathed. A collaborator. The Japanese-American soldier stepped forward, hands empty, posture non-threatening. He spoke in Japanese. His accent was strange, American-inflected, but the words were clear. My name is Sergeant Tanaka. I'm a translator. Captain Mercer wants me to tell you that you're prisoners of war. You will not be harmed. Silence. Then Chio laughed. It was a terrible sound, sharp and brittle as breaking glass. Liar. The captain said something in English. Sergeant Tanaka translated. The captain says he understands you don't believe him. He says you've been taught to fear us, but he's going to prove to you that you're wrong. How? Emiko found her voice. It surprised her. She'd thought fear had stolen it. How will you prove it before you... She couldn't finish. Captain Mercer looked at her directly. His eyes were blue. Strange. She'd never seen blue eyes before. They weren't the eyes of a monster. They were tired, sad, almost. He said something else. Tanaka translated. Before we what? The captain wants to know what you think we're going to do. More silence. Then Ayaka broke. The privileged girl who'd never developed the hard shell the others had. She started sobbing, great gasping sobs that echoed off the cave walls. You're going to sell us, she choked out between sobs. Sell us to your men, for... She collapsed forward, vomiting. Hana rushed to her side, holding her hair back, whispering useless comfort. The captain's face changed. Something flashed across it. Anger. But not at them. At something else. Someone else. He spoke rapidly in English. His voice was hard. Tanaka's translation was careful, measured. The captain says, he says that is not going to happen. He says whoever told you that is... Tanaka paused, searching for words. Is a liar and a disgrace. Of course you'd say that, Akane spat. You want us docile. The captain did something unexpected then. He reached down and unbuckled his pistol belt. The heavy weapon hung at his hip. He removed it carefully, held it for a moment, then placed it on the cave floor. He pushed it with his boot. It slid across the stone toward them, stopping 3 feet away. Every nurse stared at it. If I wanted to hurt you, Tanaka translated the captain's words, I wouldn't give you a weapon. Masako made a small sound, not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. What kind of trick is this? It's not a trick, the captain said through Tanaka. You're prisoners of war. Under the Geneva Convention, you have rights. You will be treated with dignity and respect. You will not be harmed, degraded, or abused in any way. That is American law. That is my oath. What is Geneva Convention? Tomo asked, confused. International law, Chio answered quietly. Rules for war. Japan. Japan is not a signatory. I know, the captain said through his translator. But America is, and you're under American protection now. From deeper in the cave, a sound, a groan, weak, dying. The captain's head snapped up. You have wounded? Chio nodded reluctantly. How many? 1. Maybe 2 hours left. The captain said something sharp in English. Another American appeared, younger, carrying a bag with a red cross. A medic. Show him, the captain ordered through Tanaka. No, Akane said. You'll kill him. He's already dying, the captain said quietly. But he doesn't have to die in pain. Masako made a decision. She stood on trembling legs and gestured. This way. The American medic followed her into the cave's depths. The others waited. Emiko's hand stayed on her capsule. Not yet. Not until she knew for certain. 3 minutes passed. 5, 10. Then Masako returned. Her face was pale, shocked. He gave him morphine, she whispered. The American. He gave our soldier morphine. His own supplies. For a dying enemy. The medic emerged behind her. He said something in English, shook his head sadly. The universal language of loss. The wounded soldier was beyond saving. 2 minutes later, a single gunshot echoed from deep in the cave. The nurses flinched, then understood. The soldier had done it himself. The final act. The Americans had given him privacy for it. The captain removed his cap, stood silent for 30 seconds. The other American soldiers did the same. They were honoring an enemy's death. Emiko's fingers loosened on the capsule, just slightly, just enough to let blood flow back into them. You need to come outside, the captain said. The cave isn't structurally sound. Artillery damage. It could collapse. Outside. Exposed. Vulnerable. We can't, Hana whispered. Outside is where your men will. The captain's jaw tightened again. He turned to his soldiers and barked orders in English. They looked surprised. One started to protest. The captain cut him off with a gesture. The soldiers filed out of the cave. Now it was just the captain, the translator, and 8 terrified nurses. The captain sat down on the cave floor. He was taller than any of them, but sitting put him lower, less threatening. My name is James Mercer, he said through Tanaka. I'm 34 years old. I'm from Iowa. I have 2 daughters, ages 8 and 6. Before the war, I was a high school teacher. I taught history. He reached into his pocket. Emiko tensed. Weapon? Trick? He pulled out a photograph. Worn. Creased. He held it up. 2 little girls with blonde hair and gap-toothed smiles. Rebecca and Sarah, he said softly. I haven't seen them in 18 months. He looked at each nurse in turn. His eyes found Emiko's. Held them. You're someone's daughter, he said through the translator. Someone's sister. Someone's friend. You're not my enemy. You never were. You're just a nurse who got caught in something bigger than any of us. Kiyomi made a small sound. Recognition. Mercy. Her Christian god, perhaps, speaking through an unexpected mouth. I need you to trust me, Captain Mercer continued. Just for the next 5 minutes. Let me get you out of this cave. Let me get you to the medical tent. Let me give you food and water and safety. After that, if you still think I'm lying, you can do whatever you think you need to do. His eyes flicked to Emiko's hand, still pressed against her collar. He knew. He understood what they carried. But give me 5 minutes, he said. 5 minutes to prove your officers lied to you. Emiko looked at the others. Masako nodded slowly. Chio pushed her glasses up, thinking, calculating, finally nodding. Tomoe shrugged. We're dead anyway. Might as well see the sun one more time. Only Akane refused. This is a trick. It's all a trick. Maybe, Captain Mercer acknowledged through translation, but if it is, you still have your capsule. Nothing changes. But if it's not a trick, if I'm telling the truth, then you've been lied to about everything. That hung in the air like smoke. Finally, Masako stood. We will come outside, she said in broken English, surprising everyone, including herself. We will see. Captain Mercer stood. Thank you, he said in English. Then, carefully in Japanese, mangled pronunciation, Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you. An enemy, saying thank you. Emiko's hand fell away from the capsule. Not released. Just loosened. 5 minutes. She could survive 5 minutes before choosing death. They walked toward the cave entrance, toward the light, toward whatever truth or lie awaited them. The sunlight was violence. Emiko raised her hand to shield her eyes, stumbling on legs that had forgotten how to walk on level ground. 3 weeks in cave darkness made the world too bright, too real, too overwhelming. The air hit her next. Clean. That was wrong. Air in war should smell like smoke and death and fear. This air smelled like ocean breeze and pine trees and something cooking. Food. Real food. Hana clutched Emiko's arm, nails digging in hard enough to bruise. "There are so many of them," she breathed. "Americans everywhere. 50, 100, more." They moved through their camp with the ease of people who own the world. Tents stretched in ordered rows. Vehicles sat parked in perfect lines. Soldiers walked with rifles slung over shoulders, not raised, not ready to fire. Some looked at the 8 nurses. Most didn't. They just kept walking, kept working, kept living. "They're not preparing," Chio whispered. For what we thought. They're just existing." Captain Mercer led them through the camp. His soldiers kept their distance, giving space, respectful distance. Emiko's mind couldn't reconcile it. Predators didn't give prey space. They passed a tent where music played, American music, strange and jazzy. Soldiers sat outside playing cards, laughing at something. One looked up as the nurses passed. He nodded, just nodded, then went back to his cards. "I don't understand," Ayaka whispered. "I don't understand what's happening." "Neither do I," Masako admitted. They reached a large tent with a red cross painted on white canvas. Medical tent. Emiko recognized the symbol, the same one she'd worn on her arm for 18 months before it had gotten too blood-soaked to matter. Captain Mercer stopped at the entrance. He spoke in English, and Sergeant Tanaka translated. "Inside are Army nurses, American nurses, female. They're going to examine you for injuries, malnutrition, and disease. No male doctors unless you request one." "Why?" Akane's voice was pure suspicion. "Why only women?" "Because you deserve privacy and dignity," the captain said simply. "You're prisoners of war, not animals." He held open the tent flap. The 8 nurses looked at each other. This was the moment when the facade would drop, when the real purpose would reveal itself. Tomoe went first, always the brave one. She ducked into the tent, held her breath, waited for the trap. Nothing happened. One by one, they followed. Inside, the medical tent smelled of antiseptic and clean cotton. 5 cots lined one side. A table held medical instruments, neatly arranged, and 3 American nurses in clean uniforms moved efficiently through the space, preparing stations. One turned as they entered. She was maybe 35, blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, eyes the color of storm clouds. She smiled. It reached her eyes. "Welcome," Sergeant Tanaka translated her words. "I'm Lieutenant Morrison. We're going to take care of you." Lieutenant Morrison gestured to a privacy screen set up in the corner. Behind it, Emiko could see a small table with medical supplies and a basin of water. "One at a time," Morrison said through Tanaka. "You can keep your undergarments on. I just need to check for wounds, infections, and assess your overall health. This is purely medical. You're safe here. That word again. Safe." Morrison looked at them, seemed to understand their terror, and added gently, "I have a sister who's a nurse. She's in the Pacific somewhere. If she were ever captured, I'd want someone to treat her like a human being. That's all I'm doing for you." Emiko felt something crack in her chest. Not break. Just crack. Masako volunteered first. She disappeared behind the screen. The others waited, every muscle tense, listening for sounds of struggle, of betrayal. They heard only quiet voices, Morrison asking questions, Masako answering, the rustle of fabric. Then Masako emerged. Her face was strange, not terrified anymore. Confused. She held a clean white towel in her hands. "She checked my heart and lungs," Masako said slowly. "She looked in my mouth and ears. She asked about injuries. Then Masako looked down at the towel. She gave me this, and warm water. She told me I could wash my face." "That's all?" Chio asked. "That's all." One by one, they were examined. Emiko went third. Behind the screen, Lieutenant Morrison waited with the tired patience of someone who had seen too many broken people. "May I?" Morrison gestured to Emiko's wrist. Emiko nodded, unable to speak. Morrison checked her pulse. Her fingers were gentle, professional, nothing else. She listened to Emiko's heart with a stethoscope, made notes on a chart, looked in her mouth with a small light. "Malnutrition," she said, and Tanaka translated. "Vitamin deficiency, probable anemia, some infected sores, but nothing that won't heal with proper food and rest." Morrison handed Emiko a towel and pointed to a basin. The water inside steamed gently. Go ahead, Morrison said through Tanaka. Clean yourself. You'll feel better. Emiko stared at the water. Hot water. They had heated water. For prisoners. For enemies. She dipped the towel in. The heat shocked her fingers. She brought the towel to her face and wiped away weeks of cave dirt and desperation. The water ran gray. She dipped again. Wiped again. Her hands were shaking. Are you all right? Morrison asked, concerned. Why are you kind? Emiko asked in broken English, words she'd never used before, pulled from some forgotten lesson. Morrison smiled sadly. Because you're a person. That's reason enough. When all 8 had been examined, Morrison called them together. Through Tanaka, she explained their conditions. All 8 had severe malnutrition. All had lice. Several had infections. One, Chio, showed early signs of dysentery. We're going to treat everything, Morrison said. But first you need to be deloused and bathed, then clean clothes, food, and rest. Bathed. The word hit like artillery. No, Akane said flatly. No, this is where it happens. This is the trick. Morrison's face showed understanding, not offense. She said something to Sergeant Tanaka, who nodded and left the tent. He returned with a woman in military uniform, Asian face, Japanese features, American uniform. This is Corporal Watanabe, Tanaka introduced her in Japanese. She's Japanese-American. She works at the women's facilities. She'll explain. Watanabe bowed slightly, a gesture that caught everyone off guard. An American soldier bowing. She spoke in perfect Japanese. I know what you're thinking. I know what you were taught. But listen to me, because I'm one of you, and I'm telling you the truth. The bathing facilities are for women only. Private stalls, female guards only. No men allowed within 50 feet. It's Army regulation, General's orders. They take it seriously. Why should we believe you? Akane challenged. Because I'm a woman, and I'm Japanese. And I know what our people taught us about Americans, Watanabe said quietly. I know about the capsules in your collars. I know about the training. I know about Lieutenant Yamamoto and his lies. Everyone froze. How do you know his name? Chio demanded. Because he gave the same speech to every unit. Same lies. Same terror tactics. And every single one of you believed him because he was an officer, and you were taught to obey. Watanabe's voice softened. I'm sorry you were lied to. I'm sorry you've been terrified. But I promise you, on my mother's grave, on my honor, you are safe. Kiyomi started crying, quiet tears that streaked through the dirt still on her cheeks. Everyone's been lying? Not everyone, Watanabe said. Not anymore. Captain Mercer had stayed outside during the examinations. Now he entered, read the situation immediately, and spoke through Tanaka. I'm going to assign Corporal Watanabe and 2 other female soldiers to escort you to the bathing facilities. I won't be there. No male soldiers will be there. The building will be guarded from outside, by women, to ensure your privacy is maintained. You'll have clean clothes waiting. Take as much time as you need. He paused, then added, and if, after all this, you still don't trust us, if you still want to use those capsules, I won't stop you, but I'm asking you to wait. Give us 1 hour to prove we're not what you were taught. He looked at each of them in turn. His eyes were honest. Emiko was a fisherman's daughter. She knew how to read weather and waves and men. This man was not lying. 1 hour, Masako said finally. We will wait 1 hour. The walk to the bathing facility felt like walking to an execution. The 8 nurses clustered together, surrounded by 3 American soldiers. All women, all professional, all maintaining respectful distance. The building was wooden, recently constructed, painted white. A sign hung on the door in English and Japanese. Women's bathing facility. Male personnel prohibited by order of Colonel Hayes. Corporal Watanabe pushed open the door. Inside was heaven or hell, depending on what happened next. White tile walls, wooden benches, and shower stalls. Real shower stalls with curtains for privacy, 8 of them. On each bench sat a basket. Inside, soap, a towel, and a set of clean clothes. Emiko picked up the soap. It was white, rectangular, and smelled like flowers. Not harsh lie, not military issue, real soap. Private stalls, Watanabe said, pointing. Curtains for privacy, hot water. Take your time. I'll be right outside the door. Guarding. No one enters but you 8. She left. The door closed. 8 nurses stood in silence. It's a trap, Akane insisted, but her voice wavered. Maybe, Chio said, but if they wanted to harm us, why go to this much trouble? Why heat water? Why give us privacy curtains? Masako walked to the nearest stall. She pulled the curtain aside. Inside was a simple shower head, a drain, a small shelf for soap. She looked back at the others. We're already dead according to our training. We should have used the capsules in the cave. If we're living on borrowed time, she trailed off. I want to be clean before I die. She stepped into the stall and pulled the curtain closed. The sound of water starting was like a gunshot. Then Masako's voice, broken and raw. "It's hot. The water is actually hot." Tomoe moved next, then Hana, then Chiyo. Emiko stood with Kiyomi, Ayaka, and Akane, the last holdouts. "This is insane," Akane whispered. "Yes," Emiko agreed. "But everything is insane now. What's one more impossible thing?" She walked to a stall. The curtain was rough canvas, but it was real. It provided privacy. She stepped inside, fully clothed, and stared at the shower head. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. She turned it. Hot water poured over her head. Emiko gasped. She'd forgotten what hot water felt like, forgotten that such luxury existed. It ran through her matted hair, down her filthy skin, soaking into her uniform, and she didn't care. She just stood there, letting it wash away 3 weeks of cave darkness. Then she began to cry. Not quietly, not controlled. Huge, gasping sobs that echoed off the tile walls. Around her, she heard others crying too. Hana, Tomoe. Even Masako, who never cried, was making sounds like something breaking deep inside. Emiko stripped off her uniform, her undergarments, everything that smelled like death and fear. She picked up the soap and lathered it in her hands. It foamed easily, gently, without burning. She washed her hair, her face, her body, watched weeks of dirt and blood and desperation swirl down the drain. She scrubbed until her skin was pink and raw and clean, until she couldn't find any more dirt to wash away, until the water ran clear. When she finally turned off the water, she stood dripping and naked and more confused than she'd ever been in her life. The enemy had given her hot water, had given her soap and privacy and dignity, had treated her like a human being when her own officers had taught her she was nothing but a potential source of shame. She dried herself with the towel. Rough cotton, but clean. So clean. She put on the clothes provided. Gray cotton pants, white shirt, clean underwear, socks. Everything fit well enough. Everything was clean. She emerged from the stall and saw her reflection in a small mirror on the wall. She didn't recognize herself. The woman in the mirror had clean skin, wet hair that would dry black and shining, eyes that were no longer wild with terror, just empty, confused, lost. One by one, the others emerged. They all had the same expression, the same bewildered, broken look of people whose entire worldview had just been shattered by kindness. Even Akane, who had fought it longest, stood with wet hair and clean clothes and tears streaming down her face. "They gave us hot water," Hana whispered, as if saying it aloud would make it real. Why did they give us hot water? No one had an answer. Corporal Watanabe entered, saw 8 clean faces and 8 broken expressions, and understood immediately. "Now do you believe me?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," Chiyo said quietly. "Everything we were taught was a lie?" "Not everything," Watanabe said gently. "But the important things, yes. You were lied to about Americans. You were lied to about surrender. You were lied to about honor. Your officers knew they were losing, and they wanted you to die rather than let the truth come out." "What truth?" Emiko asked. Watanabe met her eyes. "That there's another way to be. That enemies don't have to be monsters. That war doesn't have to strip away humanity. That even in the darkest moments, we can choose mercy." She gestured toward the door. "Captain Mercer promised you food. Are you ready?" The 8 nurses looked at each other. Masako nodded. "We're ready." They walked out into the Georgia sunlight, clean and clothed and more lost than they'd ever been. Because cruelty would have been simple. Cruelty would have confirmed everything they'd been taught. They could have died with their certainties intact. But kindness? Kindness destroyed everything. Kindness forced them to question every order they'd followed, every belief they'd held, every sacrifice they'd made. And that was more devastating than any torture could have been. The mess hall was a cavern of noise, metal trays clanking, voices in English rising and falling like waves. The smell hit Emiko before she saw the food, real food, cooking, abundant and impossible. The 8 nurses stood at the entrance, frozen. Captain Mercer gestured them forward. Through Sergeant Tanaka, he said simply, "Join the line. Take what you want." The line. American soldiers, men and women, white and black and Asian, stood holding trays, waiting their turn. Some glanced at the Japanese nurses. Most didn't. They just waited, patient and normal, as if this were any Tuesday in peacetime. Chiyo noticed first. "They're integrated," she whispered. "The black soldiers eat with the white soldiers. Women serve alongside men. There's no separation. In Japan, hierarchy was everything. Officers ate separately. Men and women never mixed. The idea of shared meals, shared space, shared dignity across such boundaries was incomprehensible. A cook appeared at the serving station. He was a massive black man with gentle eyes and forearms like tree trunks. He smiled at them, not mockery, not pity, just professional courtesy, and began filling their trays. Rice, vegetables, fried fish, bread with butter, an orange, coffee. Emiko stared at her tray. This was more food than her family in Kyushu had probably eaten in a week, more food than she'd seen in 2 months. The tray felt obscenely heavy in her hands. "Go on, miss," the cook said in English, gesturing toward the tables. "Find yourselves a seat." They found an empty table in the corner, 8 women clutching trays like they held grenades. Around them, Americans ate and talked and laughed. Normal. So horrifyingly normal. Masako picked up her fork, put it down, picked it up again. Her hands shook. Hana began crying before she even tasted anything. Just looking at the food broke her. "My students," she whispered. "The children in my village. They're starving, and I'm here. I'm here with all this." "Don't," Akane said sharply. "Don't think about them. If you think about them, you'll go insane." But it was too late. They were all thinking about them. Families back home, cities in ruins, ration cards for food that didn't exist, children with bloated bellies and hollow eyes. Tomo took the first bite. Rice. Simple white rice. Her eyes widened. She took another bite, faster. Then she was eating quickly, mechanically, tears streaming down her face as she chewed. That broke the spell. They all ate. Some slowly, savoring every impossible flavor. Others quickly, as if the food might vanish. Emiko bit into the orange, and the citrus sweetness exploded on her tongue with such intensity she nearly sobbed. She hadn't tasted fruit in a year. The fish was seasoned with salt and pepper, simple, perfect, prepared with care, even for prisoners. The bread was soft and warm, the butter melted on her tongue like a childhood memory. Halfway through the meal, the cook appeared at their table. He held a coffee pot. "Refills?" he asked, gesturing. 8 heads nodded. He poured dark, rich coffee into their cups. "Y'all need anything else? You just holler, understand?" Kiyomi responded in broken English. "Why you kind to us?" The cook paused, considering. He set down the coffee pot and looked at them. Really looked at them. "My mama taught me something," he said slowly, knowing they might not understand all the words, but hoping they'd understand the tone. "She said you can always tell the measure of a person by how they treat folks who can't do nothing for them. Y'all can't do nothing for me, but that don't mean you ain't deserving of a hot meal and some dignity." He picked up his pot and moved on. Shio translated what she'd understood. When she finished, Ayaka put her head on the table and wept. The days blurred into routine. Morning bell at 6, breakfast, work details that weren't punishing, laundry, kitchen help, light maintenance, lunch, afternoon rest, dinner, evening free time, lights out at 10, they were given pay, camp script, useless outside but functional within. They could buy things at the canteen, toothpaste, combs, writing paper, small luxuries that made captivity feel less like captivity and more like some strange alternate reality. Emiko bought a notebook. She began writing, carefully, secretly, in Japanese characters she hoped no one would read. She wrote everything. The cave. Captain Mercer's 3 words. The hot water. The food. The kindness that felt like knives in her chest. She wrote, "How do you hate an enemy who gives you soap? How do you maintain honor when dishonor would have been simpler? How do you return home and tell them the monsters were men and the men were kind?" The letters arrived in September. Red Cross had established contact. Families could be notified. Prisoners could send brief messages, receive brief messages. The connection was tenuous, delayed, but real. Emiko's letter from home was written on paper so thin it was nearly transparent. Her mother's handwriting, shaky with age, or hunger, or both. "Dearest Emiko, we received word you are alive. The Americans told us you are being treated well. We do not understand this. Your father is injured from the fire bombings, cannot work. We eat whatever we can find. The village is gone. Most families have left. We stay because we have nowhere to go. If you can come home, please come home. We need you. Your mother." Emiko read it 5 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in her notebook. That evening, all 8 nurses gathered outside their barracks. They had all received letters. They read them aloud to each other, voices breaking. Chio's father, the doctor, was working in a makeshift clinic in a bombed-out building. No medicine, no supplies. Patients dying of infections that penicillin could cure, but there was no penicillin. Masako's son was dead. She'd known already, but seeing it in writing made it final. Killed in a kamikaze attack, dead at 19, barely older than Hana. Hana's school was rubble, her students scattered. 3 confirmed dead in the bombings, the rest missing, probably starving in refugee camps or dead in ditches. Akane's sister wrote that Russian soldiers had taken everything. The family hid in cellars. 8 rats. The sister's letter ended, "Better you died in battle than live as prisoner. At least in death there is honor." Tomo's farm was burned, crops destroyed, father missing, mother and younger siblings living in a makeshift shelter, surviving on wild plants and prayer. Ayaka's wealthy family had lost everything: their business, their home, their status. They lived in a refugee center, dependent on American charity rations that barely kept them alive. Kiyomi's letter was briefest. Father disowned you when we heard of your capture. Do not return. You have brought eternal shame. You are no longer our daughter. 8 women, 8 letters, 8 different versions of the same message. Everything is destroyed. Everyone is suffering, and you are there, being fed and sheltered and treated well by the enemy. How do we live with this? Hana asked the darkness. No one answered because there was no answer. In October, the Americans offered educational programs, English classes, lectures on democracy, on American government, on the principles that supposedly guided this nation that had devastated Japan while treating Japanese prisoners with inexplicable mercy. Emiko attended everything. She needed to understand. She learned English phrases. Please. Thank you. I don't understand. She learned about the Constitution, about rights and laws, about concepts like equality and justice that seemed theoretical, but that she saw practiced imperfectly but genuinely around her. One day, Captain Mercer visited the camp. He walked through with his translator, checking on conditions, ensuring regulations were followed. He saw Emiko sitting outside her barracks with her notebook. He approached, Sergeant Tanaka with him. May I? He asked through Tanaka, gesturing to the bench. Emiko nodded, unable to speak. He sat, removed his cap, looked tired. The war was over in Europe. Japan was collapsing. Everyone knew it would end soon. Everyone except Japan. How are you adjusting? He asked. Emiko chose words carefully. In halting English, I am confused. Every day. More confused. About what? She switched to Japanese, let Tanaka translate. About why you are kind. About what this means. About everything I was taught. Captain Mercer nodded slowly. Your officers lied to you. They told you we were monsters because they needed you to be willing to die. If you knew we'd treat you fairly, you might surrender, and surrender was their greatest fear, not because it would harm Japan, but because it would reveal that they'd been lying all along. But why be kind to enemies? Because you're not my enemy, he said simply. Your government is my enemy, your military is my enemy, but you're a nurse who was following orders, trying to survive, doing her duty. That doesn't make you evil, that makes you human. He pulled out the worn photograph of his daughters. When I see you, I think, what if my daughters were caught in a war? What if they were prisoners in Japan? What would I want your soldiers to do? Japan would not treat them as you treat us, Emiko said quietly. I know this now. I know, Captain Mercer said. But that's Japan's shame, not yours. You can't control what your nation does. You can only control what you do. And you've done nothing wrong. He stood to leave. Paused. Write your story, Emiko. Someday, people need to know, not the propaganda, not the lies, the truth, that enemies can show mercy, that honor isn't about dying, it's about how you treat the powerless. He left her sitting there, notebook in her lap, tears on her cheeks, and no idea what truth even meant anymore, because the cruelest thing the Americans did was this. They showed the 8 nurses that everything could have been different. That war didn't have to strip away humanity, that even in the darkest violence, people could choose mercy, and that mercy destroyed them more completely than any torture ever could, because torture would have confirmed their beliefs. Torture would have let them die as martyrs, certain and righteous. But kindness forced them to live with the knowledge that they'd been expendable to their own leaders while being valued by their enemies, that they'd been taught to fear mercy more than death, that the monsters they'd been warned about were actually just men, tired and far from home, who'd been raised to believe that even enemies deserved dignity, and that truth was heavier than any burden they'd carried in the cave. August 15th, 1945. The announcement crackled through camp speakers in English, then Japanese. Emperor Hirohito's voice, thin and distant, speaking words that had never been spoken before. Japan surrendered, unconditionally, completely, forever. The 8 nurses gathered in their barracks, listening to their god-emperor admit defeat. Some women in other barracks wailed. Some attempted suicide, believing death was preferable to this dishonor. Emiko and her 7 companions sat in silence. They had already died once in that cave in Okinawa. This was just paperwork. What happens to us now? Ayaka asked. They'll send us back, Chio said. Repatriation. We'll go home. Home. The word felt foreign, meaningless. What was home? Rubble and starvation and families who viewed their survival as shame? Kiyomi spoke quietly. I don't have a home. My father's letter made that clear. None of us have homes, Akane said flatly. We have addresses where shame lives. Masako, ever the maternal one, tried to rally them. We survived. That matters. We return. We rebuild. We what? Tomo interrupted. Tell them the enemy fed us better than our own government? Tell them we slept in clean beds while they starved? Tell them we were treated with dignity we'd never experienced under our own flag? We tell them nothing, Akane said. We stay silent. Silence is survival. But Emiko touched her notebook, hidden under her mattress. Captain Mercer's words echoed, "Write your story. Someday, people need to know." The repatriation process began in October. Lists were posted, names called, women transported in groups to processing centers, then ships, then home to a Japan they no longer recognized. Emiko's name appeared on the November transport list. She had 3 weeks. On her last day, Lieutenant Morrison gave her a care package: soap, toothpaste, small supplies to take home. "For your family," Morrison said. "I know things are difficult there." Emiko accepted with trembling hands. Even now, even at the end, kindness from the enemy. Captain Mercer came to say goodbye. He found all 8 nurses. They'd requested to be transported together, the final thing they could control. "I want you to know something," he said through Sergeant Tanaka, who'd accompanied him. "What happened to you? The lies you were told, the fear you lived with. That wasn't your fault. You were victims of your government's propaganda. You deserved better. From your leaders. From your nation." Chio asked the question they all wondered. Will America always be this kind? To enemies? Captain Mercer's smile was sad. America isn't perfect. We have our own sins, our own failures, but we try to hold to principles, that even in war, some things are sacred, that prisoners have rights, that might doesn't make right. He paused. We don't always succeed, but we try. Japan does not try, Emiko said quietly. Japan expects death. I know, the captain said, and I'm sorry. You deserved a nation that valued your life. The transport ship was crowded. Hundreds of women, all returning to uncertainty. The journey took 2 weeks. Emiko spent it writing in her notebook, recording everything before memory could soften it, before survival instinct could revise it into something more bearable. She wrote about the cave, about the capsule in her collar, about Captain Mercer's 3 words that shattered her world. You are safe. She wrote about hot water and soap and crying in the shower, about food that tasted like guilt, about letters from home that felt like knives, about kindness that destroyed certainty. She wrote, I thought capture would be the end. Instead, it was an awakening. The enemy showed me that mercy is possible, that humanity can survive even in war, that I deserved dignity, and now I must return to a nation that taught me I deserved only death. How do I live with this knowledge? How do I exist in a Japan that views my survival as betrayal? The ship docked in Yokohama. The city was skeletal, buildings like broken teeth, people moving through rubble with the slow shuffle of the defeated. Processing took 3 days. They were questioned, gently, by American occupation authorities. Had they been harmed? Mistreated? Did they need medical attention? No, and no. The Americans seemed relieved, as if they'd feared their own soldiers might have failed, as if the treatment of prisoners actually mattered to them. Finally, they were released, given minimal supplies and travel permits, told they could go home. The 8 nurses stood outside the processing center. Beyond lay Japan, devastated, starving, occupied, defeated. This is where we separate, Masako said. Different villages, different families, different futures. Will we tell? Hana asked. Will we tell the truth about what happened? Who would believe us? Akane responded. They'll call us collaborators, traitors, women who traded honor for comfort. But it's the truth, Kiyomi insisted. Truth doesn't matter when shame is easier, Chio said. Japan needs to believe America was cruel. It's simpler. It preserves the narrative that we lost honorably. They embraced 8 women who'd survived impossible things together. Then they scattered. Emiko traveled south to Kyushu. 3 days by train through destroyed cities and burned villages. She arrived home to a village that was more memory than place. Her family's house stood mostly. One wall missing, roof patched with scrap metal. Her mother answered her knock. For a moment, they just stared. Then her mother pulled her inside, embracing her with arms that felt skeletal. You're alive. You came back. Her father sat in the corner, bandages on his head and arm, burns from firebombing. He looked at Emiko and his eyes filled with tears. They said you were captured. Yes. They said you were being held by Americans. Yes. They said... He stopped, couldn't continue. Emiko's mother whispered, We thought you were being hurt, used. We thought you were suffering. Emiko looked at her parents, starving, injured, living in ruins. She thought of the clean barracks, the hot meals, the medical care, the soap that smelled like flowers. I was treated well, she said carefully. According to international law, I was given food and shelter. I was not harmed. Her father's face twisted. Not relief. Something more complicated. They fed you? Yes. While we starved? Yes. Silence filled the broken room. Her mother's voice was small. The enemy was kind to you? Yes. Her father turned away. His shoulders shook. Emiko realized he was crying. Then everything they told us was a lie, he whispered. Everything we believed. Everything we sacrificed for. All lies. That night, Emiko lay on the floor of her partially destroyed childhood home. Her parents slept nearby, their breathing rough with malnutrition and despair. She thought about Captain Mercer's daughters in Iowa, about Lieutenant Morrison's sister nursing somewhere in the Pacific, about Corporal Watanabe who'd bowed to them, about the cook who'd offered refills with dignity. She thought about the cruelty of kindness, how torture would have been simpler, how death would have been easier. But mercy? Mercy demanded that she live, that she carry this impossible knowledge, that she exist in a world where enemies had treated her better than her own nation. 30 years later, in 1975, Emiko stood in a university lecture hall in Tokyo. She was 54, gray-haired, respected, a nurse who'd worked in hospitals, raised children, lived quietly. But the notebook had survived, hidden for 3 decades. And now, finally, Japan was ready to hear, maybe not accept, but hear, the complicated truth. In August 1945, she began, voice steady, 8 Japanese nurses were captured in Okinawa. We had cyanide capsules sewn into our collars. We expected death. We expected dishonor. We expected the Americans to be monsters. She paused. The audience was silent. Instead, an American captain said 3 words that destroyed everything we believed. You are safe. She told them everything. The cave, the fear, the hot water, the food, the letters from home, the guilt, the confusion, the mercy that broke them more completely than cruelty ever could. When she finished, she opened her notebook, worn, water-stained, 30 years old, and read the final entry. They expected us to be broken by cruelty. Instead, we were broken by kindness. They expected us to die with our certainties intact. Instead, we lived with the knowledge that we'd been lied to. The enemy gave us soap when we expected death, and that small act of human dignity revealed that our own leaders had viewed us as expendable. This is the truth I carry. This is the weight I will bear until I die. Not the shame of capture, but the knowledge that mercy was possible, and our own nation chose cruelty instead. She closed the notebook, looked at the audience, saw shock, disbelief, some anger, some tears. Captain James Mercer told me to write this story. He said people needed to know that enemies can show mercy, that even in war, humanity can survive. He was right. This is the story that needs to be told, not to glorify America, not to condemn Japan, but to remember that how we treat the powerless defines us more than how we treat the powerful. She held up her notebook. This is my testimony, that on Okinawa in 1945, 8 nurses learned that the monsters were men, and the men were kind, and that truth changed everything. Years later, when Emiko's granddaughter asked her what she'd learned from the war, she answered simply, I learned that cruelty confirms your beliefs, but kindness destroys them. I learned that honor isn't about dying, it's about how you treat people who can't fight back. I learned that the enemy gave me soap when my own nation gave me a suicide pill, and I learned that truth is heavier than shame. She looked at her granddaughter. Remember this. They told us Americans would sell us to their men. Instead, they gave us hot water and dignity. That's the story that matters, not the battles, not the politics, but the moment when an enemy chose mercy, and 8 women learned that everything they'd been taught was a lie. The granddaughter asked, was it hard to live with that knowledge? Harder than you could imagine, Emiko said, but necessary, because if I didn't tell the truth, then Captain Mercer's kindness would be forgotten, and the world needs to know that even in humanity's darkest hour, mercy is possible. She died in 1992, at 71. Her notebook was donated to a peace museum. Schoolchildren read it now. They learned that enemies can be human, that propaganda lies, that mercy matters. And they learned 3 words that changed 8 lives. You are safe. Not you are prisoners. Not you are defeated. But you are safe. 3 words that broke them. 3 words that saved them. 3 words that proved the most powerful weapon isn't violence, it's dignity.